Within this glittery blue binder is not my homework, not my grandma's recipes, and unfortunately not a magical and mystical spell book. It's pretty close though. It's my textbook for my film as literature class this semester. Inside these shimmering edges, you'll find countless explanations of the canonized cinema from the beginning of it to today, all aided by countless images. And despite the hundreds upon hundreds of images within these pages, outside of the animation section, which I might add is 389 pages into the book and a mere 11 pages long, I could find only 7 image examples which came from an animated film. Yeah. So why is that? Because after all, don't animated films employ many of the same general rules of filmmaking, like compositional elements, shot types, editing rules, scoring, et cetera, I could go on. The point is, it's all so very consistent, regardless of whether the film is animated or shot in live action. I've made 2 animated short films and am currently working on my 3rd. So I can tell you that I do, in fact, use all of those same principles like any other live-action filmmaker. The difference is simply the execution. So clearly, artistry is not the issue here. Rather, it's recognizing that artistry that is. It's pretty difficult to observe this grand omission of the animated medium without wondering if it's because of the general appeal of many animated films. The accessibility of such narratives often results in animation being given the misnomer of a quote-unquote children genre, even though it is neither inherently targeted towards children or a genre. It's a medium. In the United States, our relationship with animation is one founded on fairy tale adaptations and family-friendly stories, which we can comfortably attribute to the influence of just a handful of major American studios. As a kid, I had some kind of ready-to-wear princess costume for at least 5 different Halloweens. But it's not just the prolific culture of commercialization around American animation that necessarily blurs our understanding of it as an art form. Rather, it's also the lack of emphasis on the artists behind the animation that further muddles our understanding of it as such. For example, American animation directors are rarely highlighted in the marketing for their films, such as trailers, and are almost never discussed in tandem with their live-action counterparts. We recognize art as a human endeavor, which is why AI art generates so much skepticism. So recognizing the people or a person behind a work of art is crucial to our perception of it as art. The lack of emphasis on the artists behind animation and the childhood associations with it foster the conditions for us to simply write off the medium as for kids. And that was certainly the attitude taken at the 2022 Oscars. Despite the dismissal of animation, that year, one of the nominees was the critically acclaimed adult animated documentary Flea, directed by Jonas Poher Rasmussen. Flea, a European production, tells the harrowing true story of an Afghan boy under the pseudonym Amin, who flees his home country to seek refuge in Europe. Animation probably seems like an odd choice for a documentary, because after all, aren't those about real things with real images? But Flea is different. It's a documentary where its political nature endangers the very people whose stories it shares. So Flea protects its narrator by depicting his journey and interview through an animated representation. And that's the thing. Animation is a tool, one that allows for any and every story to be told regardless of real-life limitations. The very term itself comes from the Latin word animatio, which means the bestowing of life. And that is what animation does. It bestows life on all that it depicts, whether that be sentient toys, storybook ogres, and my personal favorite, the underestimated stick figure. Critically acclaimed indie darling It's Such a Beautiful Day by American filmmaker and animator Don Hertzfeldt is a far cry from the animation many of us are used to. In It's Such a Beautiful Day, all the characters are hand-drawn stick figures, including the main character, Bill. And for the parents out there, despite your kid being able to draw these characters, I wouldn't necessarily rate this movie as PG. In the film, Bill struggles with an undefined terminal illness, and as he deteriorates, so does the animation. It loses its crispness over time and becomes riddled with light leaks. The message of It's Such a Beautiful Day hinges on the appearance of simplicity, as the dichotomy between unassuming stick figures experiencing the most raw manifestations of the human condition only accentuates the emotional impact. Tragically, that did not stop my mom from falling asleep 20 minutes into the movie. But to be fair to her, so much art goes unappreciated because many of us have never had the opportunity or the resources to learn why something matters. Are any of you aware of the social media trend of people going to museums and standing next to art pieces that they think they could have made? Raise your hand if you think you could have made this. Okay, I think some of you didn't raise your hands because you know where I'm going with this. I hate to break it to you, to all of you who raised your hands, but the only way that you could have painted something like this was if you formulated a whole new pigment that has never existed before and turn it into the bluest paint in the world. This painting is a lot more impressive now that we know the process behind it, right? So let me put you onto some filmmaking lingo. When I want to animate, I need to decide the frame rate. Frames are the sequential images that flash by and create the illusion of movement in a video. The more frames per second, or FPS, the smoother the video will appear. The cinematic standard is 24 FPS, and I do not know about you all, but I have homework and track and field practice. If you think that I have the time to make 24 drawings for every single second of animation in my films, I welcome you to come to my house and write my economics paper so that we can make that a reality. Understandably, I cut corners and animate at 12 or even fewer frames per second to save time, which is a common practice in animation. The end result is less smooth, but far more budget-friendly. But what happens when we combine different frame rates into one sequence of animation? Well, if you're working on the medium-redefining movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, directed by Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman, you might find an innovative storytelling technique in it. In Spider-Verse follows Miles Morales, who is a newcomer to the Spider-Man variant club. He is thus animated at 12 frames per second to demonstrate his ineptitude with his newfound powers. His fellow Spider people swing circles around Miles with their well-rounded abilities and are animated at the standard 24 frames per second. It is a subtle difference, but one that really goes to emphasize Miles' amateurish movements in comparison to the rest of them. It is only once Miles accepts the mantle of Spider-Man by the end of the film that he, too, joins the ranks of those animated at 24 frames per second. By taking advantage of a variable frame rate, these filmmakers were able to tell a whole story about an awkward kid finding his footing through just the smoothness of his animation. While not impossible, it is much harder to achieve something like this in the live-action medium. Animation offers far more flexibility and experimentation when it comes to visual styles, as it actively encourages a heightened suspension of disbelief. It's easy to point to foreign and indie productions as markers of the medium's caliber, but Spider-Verse demonstrates how our mainstream animation has never warranted dismissal either. Animation's ability to depict anything is why it is so well suited to telling stories of the imagination and the fantastical and wondrous. If I can think it, draw it, and then draw it a million, billion, kajillion, 32 more times, I could tell whatever story I want. And as we've seen, you don't even need to draw to animate. Animation can be made with practically anything. There is the standard 2D and 3D animation that we've all come to know, but there's also clay animation, sand, paper cutout, oil paint, real people. I've even seen dead cockroaches. The point is, animation lends itself to constant reinvention. In the arts, filmmaking is relatively new to the scene. While we've been making paintings for at least the last 50,000 years, we've only been making films for about 130. Being so young, film is one of the most rapidly evolving art forms today. And I would argue that it is animation which has had the most insane growth spurt over the last few decades. With the rise of the internet, computers in our pockets, and the increasing accessibility of arts education, never before have so many people had the opportunity to enter the field of animation. I myself discovered a passion for drawing because of YouTube and would watch hours and hours and hours of videos of how to draw a person or whatever the heck color theory is, which is the origin story of so many people around the world. We're accustomed to thinking about accelerating innovation in the fields of science and technology, but the same is just as true in the fields of art. Just go online, and you can find a plethora of student and foreign and indie productions from across the world with novel visual styles and innovative storytelling techniques from the newest generation of animators, all empowered by the increasing ease of making an animated film. 70 years ago, if I wanted to make 7.5 minutes of 2D hand-drawn animation, this was kind of my only option. This is about 11,000 sheets of paper, because we couldn't fit the whole 15,000, which would be 10 minutes. Today, I really only need this, my iPad. To illustrate this point further, just this past week, the winner of the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature went to the Latvian film Flow, directed by Gins Zilbalotis. Flow's win is historic for a multitude of reasons, but namely because it was animated entirely in the free, yeah, I said free, 3D computer modeling software Blender. So just as creation gets easier, so does the ability to discover and engage with art. You don't need to be enrolled in some prestigious Florentine art academy in the 1500s at the age of -3 and study for 25 years under some dude who has a Medici for a sugar daddy to make art anymore. So now, more than ever, please don't look away. At the end of the day, I promise to not break into your house on movie night to peer pressure you into watching the new Wallace and Gromit flick, even if I think you really should. You get to choose the stories you interact with and let shape you. It might be one told to you by a friend, maybe one read in a library, and of course, perhaps one watched in a movie theater. It might also be a story you tell yourself, like, "You're too old for that," or "You're not good enough." One I hear a lot, because I'm known around campus as an artist, is, "I'm not as creative or talented as you." And to be honest, I don't actually believe that's true. To put it in the words of Bob Ross, a man who made painting accessible long before the rise of the internet, I think there's an artist hidden at the bottom of every single one of us. These kinds of stories are pretty hard to realize. They're probably 389 pages into your book. It's pretty hard to find. But it is within those pages that we find a world of endless possibility. It is a world we all deserve if we can permit ourselves to embrace it. So when you leave here tonight, I don't ask you to formulate a whole new color never before known to mankind, but to look for a story one never before known to you. Thank you.